Hi, my wife is incredibly lucky. For Christmas I brought her the Olympus 150-400mm lens with the built-in 1.25 extender. There's been a 12-month waiting list for these. If you order one new, you've got to wait 12 months before you get it. I managed to get this second hand, so there's no waiting list and it's in mint condition. Specification wise, it's got to be the ultimate wildlife photography lens. It's built for a micro four third camera, so it's got a 2x chip factor, so we're really talking a 300 to an 800mm lens. You throw a switch on the side and put the 1.25 extender on, you've now got a 1000mm lens just by throwing a switch. And like all Olympus Pro lenses, optically it's very, very good, with the extender or not. If my wife ever gets interested in photography, she's going to really appreciate owning this lens. So today we're at Welney, the Wildfowl and Wetland Trust Reserve in Norfolk, and I've been here all day and I've stayed in this one position. So I'm in the hide underneath the main hide, and it's had a bit of a history as to whether you can access this hide. When I was in my 20s, there used to be a door in the back of the main hide. You went through that door, down some steps, and you were here. And lots of photographers used to come here because you're at ground level, you're at water level, and you always prefer that photographically. Well, then they started to lock the door and you couldn't get down here. Then there's been periods where you could, but you had to pay extra to come into this hide. Now they've put a door on the side here, so you don't have to come in from that hide above you anymore, and you can just walk in. And there's been photographers in here all day. It's getting towards the end of the day now, so they've all gone home. Now originally there was no lens apertures here to be able to put your lenses out, it was just a brick wall. And two photographers came down here, came down the steps with a hammer and chisel, and they chiselled out a couple of the bricks so they could poke the lenses through. Sounds a bit extreme, doesn't it? I am exaggerating slightly because they did actually phone up Peter Scott beforehand to get his permission to do so. And I don't know when this was exactly, but let's say the 1970s, and things were a bit different then. You could do things like that without worrying about health and safety and insurance policies. It was a different world in those days, but since then there's all these apertures been put in there, and it's my favourite hide at Welney to photograph. So all of the video and stills pictures I took on the day were taken with the Olympus 150-400mm lens and the M1X camera body. All of the video was taken in slow motion, 120 frames per second, high definition, and that means manually focusing, which I don't find easy. I have the peaking assist on, which definitely helps. So these are mostly widgeon coming in, there's some teal amongst them. And I really enjoy looking at wildlife in slow motion. Large flocks of black-tailed godwits, and they really look spectacular as they circle round, and they take off quite frequently. You can't always see what has disturbed them, perhaps a passing peregrine. And about midday they feed the birds, so somebody comes out with a wheelbarrow full of grain, and then you get a lot of activity, and the bird numbers build up just prior to this because they know they're going to be fed. The pochards especially are very prone to bathing after they've been feeding, and you've maybe got 20 or 30 birds all doing this at the same time, so plenty to pick from. The main purpose of today's photography is to assess the lens, and that's easier to do with stills pictures than video, so let's look at a series of stills pictures. The first thing to say is the autofocus on the M1X Olympus camera does not begin to compare to the Sony A1. There's a huge gulf. Hopefully the next Olympus camera is going to catch up, and at this point, which is the middle of January as I'm talking now, it's hoped that Olympus will make an announcement in the last week of February about the new camera at the big Japanese camera fair. But this is not a difficult subject for any autofocus system, and the Olympus cope with these large flocks of black-tailed godwit no problem at all. It managed about 6 sharp pictures of this shelduck as it flew past two, all in focus, and when these hooper swans took off, it's the right-hand bird it focused on, which is perhaps not surprising, as it's the right-hand bird whose head and eye therefore is close to the centre of the picture, which it's going to prioritise. But at least the one bird was sharp, and the left-hand bird is close to sharp. A couple of mute swan headshots also taken at the 400mm end of the lens. As well as looking for the sharpness and resolution of the lens, you also want to know, does it always acquire focus, or does it sometimes drift and not quite get it right? So these are just 2 shots taken from a burst of about 10, and every one of them was in focus. Northern pochard also at the 400mm end. I'm very happy with the quality. When I'm looking at these pictures on my monitor at full size, I can see lots of feather detail. A lot more difficult for you to be able to see it on YouTube, where the images is quite compressed, but the quality is superb. Now this shot is taken with the built-in 1.25 extender, so a 1000mm lens, and again lots and lots of detail. And you know, I would expect this because we've now got an extender that's actually designed for that one lens, and I'd expect it to be optically perfect. Same combination, so still a 1000mm, the bird has come a bit closer to me, and still very pleasing to look at. Now the next 3 pictures are taken at the 400mm end with the built-in 1.25 extender and with the external 1.4 extender. Now you can start to see a difference. The quality has dropped off marginally. It's still good, it's still acceptable, and I'm sure I'm going to take lots of pictures with this combination. It's the equivalent of a 1400mm lens. The next 2 pictures are taken at the ultimate extreme, 400mm, built-in 1.25 extender and the external 2x extender. This is the equivalent of a 2000mm lens. The quality drops off a little bit more. Worse than that, the autofocus definitely hunts. It doesn't lock on every time, and sometimes it's hunting quite a lot. Now I think we can reasonably expect that the next Olympus camera will be improved upon the autofocus, and it may stop this hunting problem. But the lens resolution is not as good as I'd like it to be, but I didn't get to close the lens down at all. Perhaps I need to try that next time when I'm using the 2x extender. Just a couple of pictures with the 150mm end of the lens without any extender, so the equivalent of a 300mm, and optically perfect. These remaining few hooper swan pictures were taken at the 400mm end with the built-in 1.25 and the 2x extender, so the equivalent of a 2000mm lens. And as with the pochard pictures at these extreme focal lengths, I did have the problem of the lens hunting. And optically you can see there's a slight lack of feather detail in the head. Here we're back to the 400mm with just the built-in 1.25 extender, and that is absolutely perfect. That is a combination I shall be using a lot. It's the equivalent now of a 1000mm lens. I'm also very happy when I put the 1.4 extender on combined with the built-in 1.25. That works. I won't be using the 2x extender combined with the 1.25 as often. I'll just finish off with some pictures of the northern pochards where I tried to take them diving. They almost leap up out of the water when they dive down to push themselves under the surface, and the Olympus autofocus is more than adequate for this sort of subject. These are taken at a variety of focal lengths but without any of the extenders. The other way to test the lens is to photograph a fixed object like a lens chart or just a bit of text pinned to the wall. So I want to do that over the next week or so, where you're not dealing with a moving bird. But I think both tests are important, because you do need to know if the autofocus is acquiring focus, as I mentioned earlier. And on the whole, it certainly was, so long as I wasn't using the 2x extender. Thanks for watching.